Broken heart, my husband beat me up just because the soup wasn't salted. His fists rained on me like I was a stranger in his house, not his wife. My body shook from the pain, but my heart broke more when he looked at me without a drop of pity. And the very next morning, while I still had bruises on my face, he stood tall, tied his necktie, and said coldly, "My friend is coming for lunch today. Cover everything up and smile. Do you understand?" I nodded, though my lips were bleeding. He walked out like nothing had happened. But that same afternoon, when he entered his boss's office at work, his face suddenly turned pale as chalk. And that, dear viewers, is where my story begins. Before I go deeper, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Margaret. I am 64 years old, and I'm speaking to you right now from Dallas, Texas. Please, if you are listening to this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the notification button for more upcoming interesting stories. Also, tell me in the comments from which part of the country you're watching from. I'd love to know. Now, let me take you back to how everything started. Before that shocking moment when my husband's face drained of all color in his boss's office. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the only daughter in a family of 4. Life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. My mother always said, "A woman's home should be her safe place." Those words followed me into my marriage, but they became the very thing that mocked me when the man I married turned my home into a prison. I was just 21 when I met Robert. He was handsome, charming, and he knew exactly what to say to sweep a young girl off her feet. My friends envied me, my parents praised me, and I thought I had found the man who would protect me forever. But protection was the last thing Robert offered me. At first, the changes were small. He would raise his voice when he was angry, slam doors, or walk out on me during arguments. I told myself every couple fought. But soon his anger found my body. A slap here, a shove there. And before long, his fists replaced his words. I remember the first time he hit me. It was over dinner too. I had cooked chicken, but I had forgotten to make his favorite side dish, mashed potatoes. He looked at the table, then at me, and before I could even say sorry, his palm struck my cheek. I was too shocked to cry. I just stood there frozen, trying to understand if this was the same man who had once knelt down to propose to me. Afterwards, he brought me flowers and apologized, swearing it would never happen again. And like a fool in love, I believed him. But that was the beginning of my long, painful journey. The night before the soup incident was one of the worst. I had spent the whole day cleaning the house and preparing food. Robert came home tired and grumpy. I served him dinner, praying in my heart that everything would be fine. He tasted the soup, dropped his spoon with a loud clang, and his eyes darkened. "Is this what you call food? Where is the salt? Do you want me to die eating this tasteless thing?" He shouted. Before I could apologize, before I could grab the salt shaker, his fist landed on my face. Blow after blow until I felt my body collapse to the ground. My ribs ached, my face burned, and my ears rang. He finally stopped breathing heavily and walked away like I was nothing. I spent the night on the kitchen floor, too weak to get up. My tears soaked the tiles. I kept asking myself, why me? Why is the man who promised to love me treating me like dirt? But the more I asked, the more silence answered me. The next morning I could hardly move. My left eye was swollen shut, and my lips were bruised. I thought maybe he would feel sorry when he saw me. Maybe he would at least say, "I'm sorry." But instead, he acted as if nothing happened. As he buttoned his shirt and tied his tie, he said in a cold voice, "My friend is coming for lunch today. Cover everything up. Smile. I don't want him to see anything." I stood there trembling, wondering how a man could be so heartless. He looked at me one last time, and I swear I saw not even a flicker of regret in his eyes. Then he walked out. And later, when he arrived at his office and stepped into his boss's room, the unthinkable happened. His confidence vanished. His voice shook. His face went pale as chalk. Something in that office was about to change everything. But before I tell you what happened there, let me take you a little deeper into my past, so you can understand why this moment was so important. I had always been a woman who kept quiet about my pain. I hid my bruises with makeup. I wore long sleeves to church so nobody would see the marks. When neighbors asked why I looked tired, I smiled and said, "I'm fine." I thought silence would keep the peace, but silence only gave Robert more power. There were days when I wanted to run away. I would pack my bag, look at the door and then hear his footsteps. Fear would freeze me and I would unpack again. You see, fear is the strongest chain. It ties your hands and feet without ropes. One evening, I visited my old friend Susan. She looked at me carefully and asked, "Margaret, are you okay? You look different." I wanted to tell her. I wanted to scream, "Help me!" But the words stuck in my throat. I just smiled and said, "I'm fine. Just tired." She gave me a long look and said softly, "One day the truth will come out. And when it does, I hope you'll still be alive to tell it." Her words haunted me. I didn't know they would come true sooner than I thought. Because that morning after he beat me over the soup, Robert's boss was about to reveal something that would shake not just him but me too. And the first sign of it was the way Robert's hands trembled when he walked into that office. His boss's voice was cold, the air was heavy, and Robert's face. Oh, his face lost all color. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of his downfall. Robert stood in front of his boss's desk, trying to steady his hands. He had walked into that office like a lion, but in seconds he shrank into a trembling mouse. His lips parted, but no sound came out. "Sit down, Robert," his boss said in a calm but firm tone. Robert swallowed hard, pulled out the chair and sat. His back was stiff, his eyes darted around the room. Something about that meeting was not ordinary. "Do you know why I called you here this morning?" his boss asked. Robert shook his head, but his voice betrayed him when he whispered, "And no, sir." His boss leaned forward, tapping a file on the desk. "I received a disturbing call last night. Concerns you. Your reputation." At that moment, Robert's world began to spin. His pale face turned almost gray, and sweat formed on his forehead. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the boss continued. "Before I go into details, I want to remind you that this company values integrity, not just in the office but also in the home. A man who cannot respect his family cannot be trusted with leadership." Robert's fingers dug into the arm of the chair. My husband, who beat me up for soup, was now being reminded that how he treated his family mattered. I wasn't there to see it with my own eyes, but later, I would learn every single detail of that meeting. The call that had shaken Robert's boss came from someone unexpected. It wasn't a coworker, it wasn't a stranger. It was the very friend Robert had invited for lunch that afternoon. Yes, the same friend I was told to smile for, to cover everything up for, had betrayed him. But not in the way Robert feared. You see, this friend knew something about Robert. Something he had been hiding for years. And now, that secret was crawling out like a snake from under the bed. But let me pause there, because to understand the weight of what was happening in that office, you need to know what my life looked like at home that very morning. After Robert left for work, I dragged myself to the bathroom and stared at the mirror. My swollen eye, my cut lip, the dark marks on my skin. This was not the face of the young bride I used to be. This was the face of a prisoner. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break the mirror. But instead I did what Robert ordered. I covered up. Layers of makeup, scarves and fake smiles. Because that's what abused women do best. Pretend. I walked into the kitchen to prepare the food for his friend. My hands shook as I cut vegetables. My body ached with every movement. But I kept going because fear whispered, "If you disobey, he will hurt you again." As I cooked, my mind drifted to memories of the early days of our marriage. Days when Robert would bring me roses, write me love notes, and call me his queen. How did that sweet man become a monster? How did love turn into chains? The sound of the pot boiling snapped me back to reality. I added salt carefully. Too carefully, because the memory of last night's beating was still fresh. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. I had to stay strong, at least for now. Meanwhile, across town, Robert sat in front of his boss, fighting to keep his composure. His boss opened the file on his desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. Robert's eyes widened. His lips trembled. I don't know what that is, sir." The boss's eyes hardened. "Don't lie to me. This is a written complaint against you. It speaks of violence, dishonesty, and disrespect, not just in this office but in your own home." Robert's heart pounded in his chest. Who would dare expose him? And then, like thunder in the sky, his boss said the name. It was Daniel who called me. The same Daniel you invited to lunch today. He told me everything he knows about you. Robert's head snapped up. Daniel, his closest friend, his trusted drinking partner, the man he bragged to about everything, had betrayed him. I didn't know it then, but Robert had confessed many things to Daniel in moments of drunken pride. He had laughed about how he kept his wife in check, how a man had to show who was boss. He had even joked about the beatings. To Robert, it was just boasting. To Daniel, it was evidence. And now, Daniel had turned all those confessions into a weapon. Back at home, I finished setting the table. Every plate, every fork, every glass was in its place. My body screamed for rest, but my fear of Robert pushed me forward. I sat on the couch, waiting for him to return with Daniel. The clock ticked slowly. My heart raced with every passing minute. I didn't know what mood Robert would be in when he came home. Would he smile? Or would he punish me again for something as small as forgetting to serve water? Finally, I heard the sound of his car in the driveway. My chest tightened. The door opened, and there he was with Daniel behind him. Robert's smile was stiff, unnatural. Daniel, on the other hand, looked calm, almost too calm. He greeted me warmly, but his eyes lingered on my swollen face, even though I tried to hide it with makeup. He knew. Robert cleared his throat. Margaret served the food. I obeyed, moving carefully so my bruises didn't show. As we ate, the atmosphere was heavy. Robert forced laughter, cracked jokes, but Daniel hardly responded. Instead, he studied me. His eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time, pity. And then it happened. Daniel put down his fork, leaned back in his chair, and said quietly but firmly, "Robert, how long will you keep doing this to her?" The room froze. My hand shook so hard I almost dropped the serving spoon. Robert's eyes widened, his face turning red. What are you talking about?" he stammered. Daniel's gaze didn't move. "Don't play dumb. I know everything. I know about the bruises. I know about the nights you beat her. And guess what? Your boss knows too. Because I told him." My breath caught in my throat. My eyes darted from Daniel to Robert. The air was thick with tension. Robert slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. "You betrayed me," he roared. Daniel didn't flinch. "No, Robert. You betrayed yourself. You betrayed the vows you made to this woman. You betrayed the image you pretend to have at work. And now everyone will see who you really are." Robert's face twisted with rage. He stood up, fists clenched, his chest heaving. I thought he was going to strike Daniel. But instead he turned toward me. His eyes burned like fire, his lips curled into a snarl. You told him, didn't you?" I froze. My voice caught in my throat. I didn't. But before I could finish, Robert lunged toward me, his hand raised high. And in that moment, an extreme event happened that changed everything. Robert's shadow fell over me as his hand lifted high in the air. My body froze in terror. I had felt his fists before, but never in front of another man. Shame and fear tangled inside me. And for a split second, I thought this was the moment he would kill me. But before his hand could land, Daniel sprang up from his chair. He grabbed Robert's wrist midair, his grip strong and unshaking. "That's enough, Robert." Daniel's voice thundered through the room. "If you dare touch her again, I swear I won't sit quietly." Robert struggled, trying to pull free, but Daniel was stronger. The two men stood locked in a battle of wills, their eyes blazing. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. Finally, Daniel shoved Robert back. Robert stumbled a little, his pride wounded more than his body. He glared at Daniel, then at me, his face twisted with hatred. "You're both against me now," he spat. "My own wife and my friend?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, Robert. We're against the monster you've become." I sat there trembling, my hands clutching my apron. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. For the first time in years, someone was standing up for me. Someone was calling out Robert's cruelty right in front of him. But Robert wasn't a man who took humiliation lightly. His pride was a fragile glass, and Daniel had just shattered it. "Get out of my house!" Robert roared at Daniel. Now, Daniel didn't move. He looked at me instead, his eyes softening. Margaret, you don't have to live like this anymore. You deserve better than a life of pain. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I couldn't speak. Fear had sealed my lips. Robert grabbed Daniel's collar, his face inches away from his. Leave. Before I do something we'll both regret. Daniel pushed him off and stood tall. I'll leave, Robert. But remember this, your time is running out. The truth will catch up with you, and when it does, you won't be able to hide behind threats. With that, Daniel turned, gave me one last look and walked out the door. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. Robert's chest heaved with fury. He turned his burning gaze on me, and I knew I was in danger. You think this is funny? He snarled. You think you can make me look weak in front of my boss, in front of my friend? I shook my head desperately. I didn't tell him anything, Robert. I swear. But my words fell on deaf ears. His pride had already made up its mind. He stormed toward me, grabbed my arm so hard I felt the bones scream, and yanked me to my feet. His breath was hot against my face as he hissed. You'll pay for this. Tonight, you'll learn what happens to women who embarrass their husbands. My knees buckled. I tried to pull free, but his grip was iron. He shoved me toward the wall, his hand tightening around my throat. My vision blurred. My breath caught. I thought this was it. This was how my life would end. But just as the world began to spin, the front door burst open. A voice shouted, Robert, let her go. I turned my head weakly, and my eyes widened in shock. Standing in the doorway was not Daniel. It was Robert's boss. Robert froze, his hand still wrapped around my throat, when he heard the booming voice. He turned, and his eyes widened in horror. There in the doorway stood his boss, Mr. Thompson, tall, stern, his eyes blazing with fury. Behind him, Daniel followed, arms crossed, watching silently. Robert, Mr. Thompson said in a low, commanding voice. Take your hands off her. Now. For the first time since I married Robert, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. His grip on my throat loosened and I fell to the floor, gasping for air, clutching my chest. Mr. Thompson stepped forward, his polished shoes echoing against the wooden floor. He didn't look at me. His gaze was locked on Robert like a hawk about to strike. Is this what you do behind closed doors? Mr. Thompson asked coldly. Beat your wife? Choke the life out of her? Robert stammered, his face pale. Yes, sir, it's not what it looks like. She provoked me. She disrespected me in front of Daniel. You don't understand. Don't you dare blame her. Mr. Thompson's voice cracked like a whip. A real man protects his wife. He doesn't treat her like a punching bag. Robert's lips trembled, but words failed him. His pride, the very thing he clung to, was crumbling under the weight of his boss's glare. I sat on the floor, trembling, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe what was happening. For years, I had prayed someone would see the truth, someone would stop Robert. And now here was his boss, standing in my living room, exposing the monster he really was. Mr. Thompson turned to me, his voice softening. Are you okay, Margaret? I swallowed hard and nodded, though my body ached. My swollen face and bruised arms told the truth. I was too scared to speak. Pack your things, Mr. Thompson said gently. You're leaving with us. My eyes widened. Leave? Now. Yes, he said firmly. You don't have to endure this another day. Not one more. Robert's eyes bulged. No. She's not going anywhere. He stepped in front of me, blocking the path. This is my wife. She stays in my house. You can't just take her away. Daniel's voice cut through the tension. Your house? Robert, you don't own her. She's not your property. She's a human being with a right to live without fear. Robert's jaw clenched. His fists tightened. I could see the storm building inside him. You think you can just walk in here and take her? Robert growled. Over my dead body. Mr. Thompson didn't flinch. If that's what it takes, then so be it. But I promise you this, Robert. You lay one more hand on her, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life. I'll see to it that you lose everything you've built. Your job, your respect, your freedom. The words hit Robert like hammers. He staggered back slightly, his face twisted in fury and desperation. He knew Mr. Thompson had the power to destroy him. But pride is a dangerous fire. It doesn't go out easily. No one humiliates me in my own home. Robert shouted, his voice shaking the walls. His hand shot toward the side table where a heavy glass bottle sat. In one swift motion, he grabbed it, raised it high, and aimed it straight at me. I screamed. Daniel lunged forward, and Mr. Thompson's eyes widened in horror. The bottle came crashing down. The glass bottle sliced through the air, glinting in the light like a weapon of war. My scream ripped through the room as time seemed to slow. Daniel lunged, tackling Robert just before the bottle could connect with my head. The crash of bodies hitting the floor shook the whole room. The bottle slipped from Robert's hand and shattered on the tiles, shards flying everywhere. I crawled back against the wall, my body shaking violently. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as I watched the two men wrestle. Robert, stop this madness. Daniel grunted, pinning Robert's arm. But Robert's fury was like wildfire. He twisted, growled, and with a sudden burst of strength he broke free. His face was red, veins bulging, eyes wild. He looked less like a man and more like a beast cornered. You ruined everything. Robert screamed at Daniel. You turned my boss against me. You turned my wife against me. You'll pay for this. Daniel wiped blood from his lip where Robert's fist had landed. But he stood tall. I didn't ruin anything, Robert. You did that all by yourself. Mr. Thompson, who had been frozen in shock for a moment, finally snapped into action. He stepped between them, his voice booming. Enough. This ends now. But Robert wasn't listening. His pride, his rage, his fear, they had taken full control. He shoved Mr. Thompson aside, grabbed a sharp shard of glass from the floor, and raised it high. I gasped, my heart lurching. Was he going to stab Daniel? Or me? Daniel's eyes locked onto mine for a split second. Run, Margaret. Get out, he shouted. My body wanted to obey, but my legs were weak, my fear was stronger. I clutched the wall, frozen, torn between fleeing and staying. Then Robert lunged. The shard of glass slashed through the air, aiming for Daniel's chest. Daniel twisted at the last second, the shard slicing across his arm instead. Blood spurted, and he cried out in pain. No. I screamed, rushing forward, my instincts stronger than my fear. I grabbed Robert's arm, trying to pull him back. Stop this, Robert. Please. He turned his face toward me, his eyes wild, and for a terrifying second, I thought he would plunge the glass into me instead. But before he could, Mr. Thompson tackled him from behind, forcing him to the ground. The shard clattered away, skidding across the floor. The three men struggled, grunts and shouts filling the air. My living room, once a place of peace, had become a battleground. Finally, with Daniel's help, Mr. Thompson managed to pin Robert to the ground. His face pressed against the floor, his arms twisted behind him. Robert spat curses, his voice muffled by rage. You'll regret this, he roared. All of you. I'll make you pay. Mr. Thompson, panting, looked at me. Margaret, call the police. The words hit me like thunder. The police? I had thought of it so many times before but never dared. I had feared Robert's revenge, his threats, his control. But now, with Daniel bleeding and Robert raging like a madman, I knew there was no other choice. My hands shook as I picked up the phone. I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. The operator assured me help was on the way. Minutes felt like hours. Robert continued to thrash, cursing and threatening, while Daniel clutched his bleeding arm, wincing but staying strong. Mr. Thompson never loosened his grip, his face determined. Then the sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed outside the window. My heart raced as uniformed officers stormed through the door. What's going on here? One of them barked. Arrest him, Mr. Thompson ordered, still pinning Robert down. He tried to kill her. The officers moved quickly, pulling Robert up and snapping handcuffs around his wrists. He struggled, shouting, I'm the man of this house. You can't do this to me. But his words fell on deaf ears. The officers dragged him toward the door. For the first time, I saw Robert powerless, his pride shattered, his mask ripped off. I thought it was over. I thought I was finally free. But just as they were about to push him into the police car outside, Robert twisted his head, his eyes locking onto mine. And with a voice dripping in venom he shouted, "Margaret, this isn't the end. You'll regret this day. Mark my words, I'll come back for you." His threat pierced through me like a dagger. My knees buckled, my soul shivered. Even in chains, even in defeat, Robert's shadow still loomed over me. And as the police car door slammed shut, my heart sank with the chilling realization. My nightmare wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The police car pulled away, its red and blue lights fading into the distance. I stood at the doorway, trembling, my heart heavy. Part of me wanted to collapse in relief. Another part of me wanted to scream. Robert was gone for now. But his final words echoed in my ears like a curse. "This isn't the end. I'll come back for you." Daniel sat on the couch, clutching his bleeding arm, while Mr. Thompson spoke to the officers who had remained behind. They asked me questions. What happened? How long had this been going on? Why I never called before? My mouth opened, but my voice cracked. Years of silence were hard to break. Tears slid down my face as I whispered. He always said no one would believe me. He said if I ever spoke up he would kill me. The officer nodded gently. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. We'll file charges. He won't be coming back tonight." But those last words, "tonight," stuck in my mind. What about tomorrow? What about the day after? What if his threats weren't empty? When the police finally left, the house felt both quiet and heavy. Mr. Thompson helped Daniel clean his wound while I sat frozen on the edge of the chair, staring at nothing. My mind replayed the chaos, the glass bottle, the sirens. "Margaret," Mr. Thompson's voice broke through my thoughts. "You can't stay here. It's not safe." My eyes darted to him. "Leave? But this is my home." He shook his head firmly. "No house is worth your life. Pack a bag. You'll come with us until things settle." I hesitated. Leaving felt like defeat. It felt like Robert was winning, even from behind bars. But deep down I knew he was right. Daniel looked at me with tired but kind eyes. "Please, Margaret. Don't risk it. You deserve peace." Those words broke something inside me. For so long, nobody had ever said I deserved anything. I had lived under Robert's control, believing I was worthless. But now here were two men telling me the opposite. So I stood, shaky but determined, and went to pack a small bag. Just clothes, a few personal things, and my late mother's locket, the one reminder of a time when I felt loved and safe. We left the house that night. As I closed the door behind me, my chest tightened. I didn't know if I was leaving temporarily or forever. Mr. Thompson drove us to a small safe house the company kept for emergencies. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet. For the first time in years, I lay down on a bed without fear of Robert's footsteps approaching in the dark. But sleep didn't come easily. His threats echoed in my dreams, chasing me like shadows. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside made me jolt awake. The next morning, Mr. Thompson came with news. Robert is being held in custody. They're pressing charges for attempted assault and domestic abuse. My heart skipped. It was real now. The truth was no longer hidden behind closed doors. The world finally knew who Robert really was. Daniel smiled weakly. "This is the beginning of his end, Margaret." But even as hope flickered, fear still gripped me. Men like Robert didn't let go easily. Days passed, and for the first time, I began to feel what freedom might taste like. I laughed a little. I cooked meals without trembling. I even shared stories with Daniel and Mr. Thompson, things I hadn't spoken about in years. It was healing, but also frightening. Because deep down, I knew Robert's rage would not die quietly. And I was right. 1 week later, just when I started to believe I was safe, the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting to hear from the police or maybe a friend. But the voice on the other end froze my blood. "Margaret." It was Robert. "How dare you betray me? You think prison walls can hold me forever? I'm coming for you. And when I find you, not even your precious boss or that weakling Daniel will save you." The line went dead. The phone slipped from my hands. My chest tightened. My whole body shook. He knew where I was. The phone slipped from my trembling hands and clattered onto the floor. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Robert's voice still echoed in my head. Deep, menacing, unforgettable. I'm coming for you. I staggered back, my body cold with fear. How could he call me from custody? How did he even know where I was? Daniel rushed in from the other room when he heard the noise. Margaret, what happened? I pointed to the phone, my lips trembling. It was him. Robert. He said. He said he's coming for me. Daniel's face darkened, his jaw tightening. He picked up the phone, checked the caller ID, and cursed under his breath. That monster. He's supposed to be locked away. Mr. Thompson came in a moment later, and Daniel quickly explained. Mr. Thompson frowned deeply. If he can reach you from inside, it means someone is helping him. Someone is smuggling phones or passing messages. I wrapped my arms around myself, shaking. He knows where I am. How? This place is supposed to be safe. Mr. Thompson looked at me gravely. Margaret, you can't go back home. And you can't stay here either. We'll move you somewhere safer. Somewhere Robert can't reach. The fear inside me battled with exhaustion. I was so tired of running, so tired of living in constant dread. But I knew he was right. Daniel gently touched my shoulder. You're not alone anymore, Margaret. We'll protect you. For the first time in a long time, those words gave me a flicker of comfort. That night, I hardly slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the years I had wasted with Robert. How did I let myself get trapped in his web for so long? I remembered my mother's words from when I was a girl. A woman's home should be her safe place. And here I was, running from the very man who vowed to protect me. The next morning, we packed quickly. Mr. Thompson arranged for me to stay in a women's shelter under police protection. Daniel drove me there himself, his injured arm still wrapped in bandages. The shelter was filled with women of all ages, mothers, daughters, grandmothers, all carrying the same silent scars I carried. Some had black eyes, some walked with limps, others had invisible wounds in their hearts. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone in my suffering. A kind woman named Grace, who ran the shelter, took my hand and said, "You're safe here. No one can hurt you now." But even as she spoke, fear still lingered in my chest. That evening, Daniel came by to check on me. He brought flowers, simple daisies, bright and cheerful. I hadn't received flowers in years, not since Robert's early days of fake romance. "These are for you," Daniel said softly. "Not because of pity, but because you deserve kindness." Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, "Thank you." For a moment, in the warmth of that small shelter room, I felt hope. Maybe life wasn't over. Maybe I could rebuild. Maybe there was light after years of darkness. But just when I started to believe it, the storm returned. Late that night, the shelter alarm went off. A piercing sound echoed through the halls. Women screamed, rushing out of their rooms. I hurried to the door, my heart racing. "What's happening?" I asked Grace, who was shouting instructions. Her face was pale. "Someone tried to break in through the back gate. We think it was a man. He ran when the alarms went off." My stomach dropped. I didn't need to ask who it was. I already knew. Robert. Even behind bars, even under watch, he was finding ways to haunt me. And as I stood there among frightened women, my knees weak, one chilling thought consumed me. If he could find me here, where could I ever be safe? The shelter was in chaos. Women clutched their children, some sobbed, others whispered prayers under their breath. Grace and the staff tried to calm everyone down, but the fear in the air was like smoke. It choked all of us. I stood frozen near the hallway, my hands pressed to my chest. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break my ribs. "It's him," I whispered to myself. "It has to be him." Grace came over quickly, placing her hand on my shoulder. "Margaret, you're safe. The police are on their way. No one got in." But I shook my head. "You don't understand. Robert won't stop. If he can't reach me, he'll keep trying until he does." Minutes later, the police arrived. They checked the gates, the fences, the cameras. The officer confirmed what Grace feared. Someone had cut the wires on the back gate. Whoever it was knew what they were doing. "Do you think it was Robert?" Grace asked. The officer frowned. "He's still locked up. But that doesn't mean he didn't send someone." I felt my knees weaken. The thought that Robert had helpers on the outside made my blood run cold. Daniel showed up at the shelter as soon as he heard the news. His face was pale but determined. "Margaret, you can't stay here. If he knows this place, then it's no longer safe. We need to move you again." My voice shook. "Move again? Where will I ever be safe?" Daniel clenched his jaw. "With me. Come stay at my apartment. It's secure. I'll protect you." I hesitated. It felt wrong to keep running, but I couldn't deny the truth. Robert was tightening his grip, even from a distance. Maybe Daniel was right. Grace agreed reluctantly. It might be the best option, at least for now. So later that night, Daniel drove me across town to his small apartment. It wasn't grand, but it felt warm, lived in, safe. He gave me his bedroom while he took the couch. For the first time in days, I slept without alarms blaring in my ears. But safety was only temporary. 2 days later, Daniel received a letter slipped under his apartment door. No stamps, no name, just handwriting that sent a shiver down my spine. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. The words were short, but sharp as knives. "You can run, Margaret. You can hide. But I always find what belongs to me." My breath caught. My hands shook so badly the paper nearly slipped from my grip. Daniel grabbed it, his face red with anger. "This is proof. He's not acting alone. Someone is doing his dirty work." I felt tears sting my eyes. "He won't stop, Daniel. I don't know what else to do." Daniel stepped closer, his voice firm. "Then we stop him. Once and for all." His determination gave me strength, but fear still gnawed at me. That night, as Daniel slept on the couch, I lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced. How had my life come to this? Running from the man who once held me in his arms, hiding like a criminal when I had done nothing wrong. I touched the locket around my neck, whispering to my late mother. "What do I do, Mama? How do I survive this?" The next morning, we decided to visit the police again with the letter. Daniel insisted it was a death threat. The officers agreed and promised to investigate further. But promises didn't ease my fear. We returned to Daniel's apartment, exhausted but clinging to hope. Then, just as we walked through the door, we froze. The place had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, paper scattered, furniture overturned, and on the kitchen table sat a single item, my mother's locket, broken in half. I gasped, my knees buckling. No, he was here. He was here. Daniel grabbed my shoulders, his face pale. "Margaret, this isn't just a threat anymore. This is war." I collapsed into the chair, staring at the broken locket on the table. My mother's locket, the only piece of her I had left, snapped in two as if Robert himself had crushed it with his bare hands. My chest ached like someone had torn me open. Daniel cursed under his breath, pacing the room. "How did they get in?" I locked the doors. I checked the windows. "They didn't just get in," I whispered, tears sliding down my cheeks. "They wanted me to know they can get in. They wanted me to feel like nowhere is safe." Daniel knelt in front of me, his voice fierce but soft. "Margaret, listen to me. You are not weak. You are not his property. And I swear to you, I won't let him break you." I wanted to believe him. But as I stared at the shattered locket, all I could think about was Robert's promise. "I always find what belongs to me." The police came soon after Daniel called them. They dusted for prints, asked questions, and promised extra patrols in the area. But I could see it in their eyes. They were just as baffled as we were. Robert was locked up, yet his shadow was everywhere. After they left, Daniel poured me a glass of water, but my hands shook so badly I couldn't hold it. The glass slipped and shattered on the floor, the sharp sound echoing through the apartment. I jumped back with a scream before realizing it was just glass. Daniel quickly reached for me. "Hey, it's okay. Just an accident." But to me, it wasn't. It was another reminder of the fragility of my world. Everything felt like it could break at any second. That night, Daniel insisted I sleep in his room again while he took the couch. I lay under the covers, my mind restless. Every sound outside felt like footsteps, every car engine like Robert's return. Around midnight, I finally drifted into a troubled sleep. But I woke with a start to a noise, a faint scratching sound. I held my breath. The sound came again, soft, deliberate, like someone trying to pry open the window. I froze, unable to move. My body felt like ice. Then suddenly, Daniel burst into the room with a bat in his hand. "Margaret, stay behind me." The scratching stopped. Silence filled the air. We both crept to the window. When Daniel yanked the curtain open, the window was cracked open slightly, as if someone had been seconds away from climbing inside. But no one was there. Instead, taped to the glass was another note. I peeled it off with trembling fingers and read aloud. "You can hide behind others, Margaret. But when I come, they'll fall first. And then you'll be mine again." The note slipped from my hand. My legs gave way and I sank onto the floor sobbing. Daniel's face turned white with fury. "That's it. I won't let this continue. Tomorrow we're going to the judge. We'll demand more protection. And if they can't give it, then I'll take matters into my own hands." I shook my head, my voice breaking. "Daniel, you don't understand. Robert doesn't just want me scared. He wants me destroyed. And he won't stop until—" My words trailed off as the sudden sound of glass shattering rang from the living room. Both of us spun around in terror. Someone was inside. The sound of shattering glass tore through the apartment like a scream. Daniel grabbed my hand and yanked me behind him, clutching the bat with his other hand. My heart raced so wildly I thought it would burst. We crept into the living room, every step heavy with dread. The curtains swayed from the broken window, cold night air rushing in. Shards of glass sparkled on the floor. And then, out of the shadows, came a figure. Tall, broad, a hood covering his face. My blood ran cold. "Who are you?" Daniel shouted, raising the bat. The man didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, his gloved hand reaching into his pocket. My chest tightened, panic flooding through me. Was it a knife? A gun? Before I could scream, Daniel lunged forward, swinging the bat. The man ducked, the bat smashing against the wall with a sickening thud. The intruder shoved Daniel hard, sending him crashing into the coffee table. I screamed, backing toward the corner, my body trembling. The man turned his head toward me, and though his face was hidden, I felt Robert's presence in every movement. Daniel groaned, forcing himself up despite the blood dripping from his forehead. "You're not touching her," he roared, charging again. This time the bat connected. A loud crack echoed through the room as it struck the intruder's arm. He staggered back, clutching it, but still didn't retreat. Then, in a voice muffled but chilling, he growled, "Robert sends his love." My knees buckled. It wasn't Robert, it was one of his men. The intruder pulled a knife from his pocket, the blade catching the dim light. My scream tore through the air as Daniel positioned himself between us. They clashed, bat against knife, the sound of metal striking wood filling the apartment. Every swing, every stab, every gasp felt like the end of the world. Finally, Daniel managed to knock the knife from the man's hand. It clattered across the floor. The intruder lunged after it, but Daniel swung the bat down with all his strength, striking the man's shoulder. The intruder howled in pain and stumbled backward toward the window. Then, in one desperate move, he leapt through the broken window, vanishing into the night. The room fell silent except for my sobs and Daniel's ragged breathing. He dropped the bat and rushed to me, pulling me into his arms. "It's over, Margaret. He's gone." But I shook my head violently. "No, Daniel. Don't you see? If Robert can send someone here, then it will never be over. Not until he's stopped for good." Daniel looked at me, his eyes fierce with determination. "Then we stop him. Together." The police arrived minutes later, sirens blaring. They took our statements, collected the knife, and promised to increase Robert's charges. But none of it gave me peace. That night, as I sat on Daniel's couch, wrapped in a blanket, I realized something. Robert had already stolen so many years of my life. If I kept hiding, he would steal the rest. I thought of the women at the shelter, the bruises, the fear in their eyes. I thought of Grace, of Daniel, of Mr. Thompson, of every person who had risked something to keep me alive. I made a decision. The next morning, I walked into the police station, my head high, my voice steady. "My name is Margaret. I'm ready to testify against my husband." The officers looked at me in surprise, but I didn't waver. For the first time, I wasn't just running. I was fighting back. Because sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes you have to choose to live. And I was ready to live. Walking into the police station that morning was the bravest thing I had ever done in my life. My legs trembled with every step, but inside I felt something stronger than fear. I felt purpose. For years, I had allowed Robert to silence me. I had lived in his shadow, hiding my bruises behind smiles, covering my scars with long sleeves, and swallowing my screams until they turned into whispers. But not anymore. The officer at the desk looked up. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I took a deep breath. "Yes. My name is Margaret. I want to testify against my husband, Robert." Her eyes widened slightly, but then she nodded. "Come with me." They led me into a private room where two detectives sat, waiting with notepads. Daniel stayed with me, holding my hand under the table. His grip gave me strength. For hours I spoke. I told them about the years of abuse, about the beatings over small mistakes, like forgetting to salt the soup, about the night he tried to strike Daniel with a glass bottle, about the phone calls, the letters, the intruder in Daniel's apartment. Every word I spoke was like lifting a heavy stone off my chest. By the end, my throat was raw, but my heart felt lighter. One of the detectives leaned forward. "Mrs. Walker, your testimony, combined with the evidence we already have, will strengthen the case. But I must warn you, this trial won't be easy. He'll fight back. He'll try to intimidate you." I swallowed hard, my voice steady. "He's been intimidating me for 25 years. But I'm still here. And I'm done being afraid." Daniel squeezed my hand, pride shining in his eyes. That night, I stayed at Daniel's apartment again. It felt safer now that the police were fully involved, but fear still lingered. I kept replaying the detective's words in my head. "He'll try to intimidate you." And he did. The very next day a letter arrived. Not slipped under the door this time, but delivered straight to the police station where I had given my statement. The envelope had my name scrawled across it in Robert's unmistakable handwriting. Inside, one chilling sentence waited for me. "A courtroom won't save you, Margaret. When I look at you again, it will be the last time." My hand shook as I read it aloud. Daniel snatched it from me, his face red with anger. "This proves it. He's still controlling everything, even from a cell." The detective took the letter as evidence, promising tighter security, but I could see the unease in his eyes. Robert was dangerous, and the closer we got to the trial, the more desperate he would become. Days turned into weeks as preparations for the trial moved forward. Daniel stood by me every step of the way, driving me to meetings with the prosecutor, helping me write down my memories, making sure I ate when the stress made me forget. Sometimes late at night I would catch him watching me with worry. One evening I finally asked, "Why are you helping me so much, Daniel? You could have walked away the night Robert attacked you." He hesitated, then said softly, "Because I see your strength, Margaret. You may not believe it, but you're one of the bravest women I've ever met. And you deserve to live, not just survive." Tears filled my eyes. For so long I had been told I was worthless. Hearing the opposite felt like healing in places I didn't know were broken. But Robert wasn't done testing me. 1 week before the trial, something happened that shook me to the core. Daniel and I were returning from the courthouse after another round of questioning. As we approached his apartment, we noticed the door slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. Daniel motioned for me to stay back while he pushed the door open slowly. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. We stepped inside cautiously. The place looked untouched. No broken furniture, no scattered papers. For a moment I thought maybe we had imagined it. Then I saw it. On the kitchen counter sat a single knife. My kitchen knife. The very same one I had used the night Robert beat me for undersalting the soup. And taped to the blade was another note. "See you soon, darling." My scream echoed through the apartment. The knife on Daniel's counter haunted me for days. I couldn't stop staring at the note taped to its blade. "See you soon, darling." It was more than a threat. It was a reminder that Robert's shadow was everywhere, that he had people watching me, slipping into my life whenever they pleased. The police collected the knife as evidence, but that didn't erase the terror in my chest. Still, I didn't back down. If anything, the knife hardened my resolve. "He wants me afraid." I told Daniel. But I won't give him that satisfaction anymore. Daniel nodded, pride in his eyes. That's the spirit. We'll face him together. The trial began the following week. The courthouse loomed large and intimidating, its stone walls cold and unwelcoming. As I walked through the doors, my knees trembled. For a moment, I thought I couldn't go through with it. But then I remembered every slap, every bruise, every night I cried myself to sleep praying for freedom. And I kept walking. The courtroom was crowded. Journalists, strangers, even women from the shelter who came to support me. Grace smiled at me from the benches, mouthing the words, "You're not alone." Then they brought Robert in. For a moment, the air was sucked from my lungs. He looked thinner, paler, but his eyes, those same cold, piercing eyes, locked on me the second he entered. And in them, I saw no remorse. Only rage. He smirked as they led him to his seat, as if this was all some kind of game. My stomach churned. The prosecutor began presenting the evidence. The police reports, the broken locket, the threatening letters, the knife. Each piece was laid out like fragments of my pain for the world to see. Then it was my turn. When I stepped up to the witness stand, my legs nearly gave out. My voice shook as I swore to tell the truth. I could feel Robert's eyes burning into me, but I refused to look at him. Instead, I looked at the jury, at the people who held my future in their hands. And I spoke. I told them about the soup. The night he beat me until I collapsed because I hadn't salted it enough. I told them about the threats, the bruises, the broken bones I had hidden. I told them about Daniel, about how Robert had tried to hurt him too. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't stop. Each word was a wound reopening, but also a weapon being drawn. The courtroom was silent when I finished. Even the judge seemed shaken. Then Robert's lawyer stood. A slick man in a dark suit, his tone sharp and mocking. "Mrs. Walker," he said, "if your husband was truly as violent as you claim, why did you stay with him for over 2 decades? Why not leave? Why not report him sooner?" The question sliced through me like a blade. I gripped the edge of the witness stand, my hands trembling. For a moment, I wanted to sink into the floor. But then a voice inside me whispered, "Tell the truth." So I lifted my chin and answered, my voice strong despite the tears. Because I was afraid. Because every time I thought about leaving, he reminded me what he could do. Because he told me no one would believe me. And because for too long I believed his lies. But I'm here now. And I'm not afraid anymore. The courtroom murmured. The lawyer tried to twist my words, but I stood firm. I wasn't that broken woman anymore. When I stepped down from the stand, Daniel was waiting. He took my hand and whispered, "You were incredible." But Robert wasn't finished with me. During a recess, as they led him out of the courtroom, he turned his head just enough for me to hear his hissed words. "This isn't over. When I'm free, you'll regret every word." My stomach dropped. The guard shoved him forward, but his threat clung to me like a shadow. The trial dragged on for days. Witnesses came forward, some from Robert's work, others from the neighborhood. Even Mr. Thompson testified, recounting the night Robert attacked Daniel in his home. The case against him grew stronger. And yet, doubt still gnawed at me. Men like Robert had a way of twisting the truth, of convincing others he was the victim. What if the jury believed him? What if he walked free? On the final day of testimony, the prosecutor presented the last piece of evidence. A recording of the phone call Robert had made from prison, threatening me. Hearing his voice echo through the courtroom made me shiver. But it also filled me with hope. This was the proof no one could deny. The judge adjourned for the day, and the jury was dismissed to deliberate. I walked out of the courtroom with Daniel by my side, the weight of everything pressing down on me. But just as we reached the courthouse steps, chaos erupted. A car screeched to a halt at the curb. The passenger door flew open. And before I could react, a man in a mask jumped out, charging straight at me. The world around me blurred as the masked man lunged forward. His footsteps pounded against the pavement, his arm outstretched, something glinting in his hand. I froze. My body wouldn't move, my legs heavy like stone. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Margaret, get down!" Daniel shouted. He shoved me to the ground just as the man swung at me. The blade missed my face by inches, slicing the air with a sharp hiss. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Reporters screamed. Someone yelled for security. The attacker turned his knife toward Daniel, but Daniel fought back with a fury I'd never seen before. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it until the knife clattered to the pavement. The two of them struggled, fists flying, shoes scraping against the concrete. I scrambled backward, my palms scraping against the steps. My breath came in sharp bursts. Around me people shouted, but no one dared get too close. "Help him!" I screamed. Finally, two courthouse guards rushed forward, tackling the attacker to the ground. The man thrashed wildly, shouting words that chilled my blood. "For Robert! For Robert!" It took 4 officers to pin him down and cuff him. The knife was kicked away, glinting in the sunlight like a final warning. Daniel staggered to his feet, his lip bleeding, his shirt torn. He rushed to me, pulling me into his arms. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, but my body wouldn't stop trembling. My voice cracked as I whispered, "He sent him. Robert sent him." The police dragged the masked man away, but not before I saw his eyes, cold, fanatical, as if Robert had poisoned his mind. The reporters swarmed, flashing cameras, shouting questions. "Mrs. Walker, how do you feel? Do you think your husband orchestrated this? Do you fear for your life?" Daniel shielded me, pushing past them. "No more questions," he barked. We made it back inside the courthouse, where officers guided us to a private room. A detective slammed his hand against the table. "This is outrageous. First the letters, now a knife attack outside the courthouse. He's escalating." My hand shook as I clutched the edges of my chair. "If the jury lets him walk free, I'll be dead before I ever leave this building." Daniel reached for my hand, squeezing it firmly. "No, we're not letting that happen." But I could see the fear in his eyes. For the first time he looked uncertain. The detective leaned closer to me. "Mrs. Walker, you need to be prepared. Robert still has people on the outside. If he's convicted, they may try again. And if he's acquitted..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. That night I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in Daniel's apartment felt alive. Every creak of the walls made me jump. I replayed the attack over and over in my mind, the knife, the shouting, the way Daniel almost got stabbed instead of me. I whispered into the darkness, "How much more do I have to endure before this ends?" But the night gave me no answers. The next morning, the jury was set to deliver their verdict. The courthouse was packed tighter than before. Security doubled after the attack. Reporters buzzed, whispering that this trial had become bigger than anyone imagined. I sat at the bench, Daniel beside me, my hands locked together so tightly my knuckles turned white. The judge entered. The jury filed in, faces unreadable. My heart thudded louder with every passing second. Finally, the foreman stood, holding the piece of paper that contained my fate. The judge asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor," the foreman replied. The courtroom fell silent. My whole body shook. And then the words that would change everything were spoken. The foreman's voice trembled slightly as he unfolded the slip of paper. The entire courtroom leaned forward. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. "In the case of the state versus Robert Walker," the foreman began, "on the charge of aggravated assault, we find the defendant." My breath caught. "Guilty." A wave of gasps and murmurs rippled across the courtroom. My hands flew to my mouth, tears springing to my eyes. Guilty. After years of suffering, after months of fear, the word finally echoed like freedom in my ears. The foreman continued, "On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty." I sobbed, shoulders shaking. Daniel wrapped his arm around me, holding me tight. For a moment, the chains that had bound my life for decades seemed to snap open. Robert sat at the defense table, his face pale but his eyes burning with fury. He leaned toward me, his lips curling into a venomous smile. It wasn't the look of a defeated man. It was the look of someone making a promise. The judge's gavel slammed. "Order. The defendant will rise." Robert stood, his shackles clinking. "Robert Walker," the judge said firmly, "for the crimes of aggravated assault and attempted murder, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Cheers broke out from the crowd, but my body was numb. 35 years. He would be old and frail before he ever saw freedom again. For the first time in decades, I could breathe. But then Robert spoke. His voice was low, but it carried across the courtroom like poison. "This isn't over, Margaret." His lips twisted. "You can lock me in a cell, but I'll still find you. I'll always find you." The bailiffs moved quickly, dragging him away as he shouted curses and promises of revenge. The gavel banged again, drowning out his voice. I slumped back into my seat, my whole body trembling. Relief battled with fear. Relief because the law had finally stood on my side. Fear because Robert's words were not empty. He had proved that before. After the sentencing, Daniel guided me outside, shielding me from the cameras and flashing lights. Reporters pushed microphones toward me. "Mrs. Walker, how do you feel? Do you believe justice was served? Are you still afraid of your husband?" Daniel raised his voice, sharp as steel. "No more questions." We hurried into the waiting car the police provided for protection. As we drove away, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, whispering to myself, "It's over. It has to be over." That night, for the first time in years, I allowed myself to sleep without checking the locks a dozen times. Daniel stayed awake, watching over me like a silent guardian. But peace didn't last. The next morning, Daniel left briefly to pick up groceries. I stayed behind, sipping tea by the window, trying to let sunlight melt away my worry. That was when I saw it. An envelope slid under the door. My blood ran cold. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The handwriting was the same jagged scrawl I had come to dread. Inside a single sheet of paper. 35 years is nothing. I told you. I'll always find you. You can't run from a ghost. My knees buckled. How? How could he reach me when he was locked away? Who was delivering these letters now? When Daniel returned, I showed him the note, my voice breaking. He stared at it, his jaw tight. He has people on the outside. Someone loyal. Someone dangerous. I wanted to believe the trial was the end, but deep down, I knew better. Robert's power didn't end with prison walls. His hatred was alive, and it was moving closer, using others as his hands and feet. That night, Daniel installed extra locks on the doors, checked every window, and even set up a small alarm system. But when we sat down, the silence in the apartment was heavy. I whispered, "He won't stop, Daniel. He'll never stop until one of us is gone." Daniel took my hand. "Then we fight. Together." I nodded, but fear lingered. My heart told me the worst was yet to come. And I was right. Because just 3 days later, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of glass shattering. Someone was inside the apartment. The crash of breaking glass ripped through the apartment like a gunshot. I jolted upright in bed, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, only listen. Shards crunched under heavy boots. A shadow moved in the hallway. "Daniel," I whispered, shaking him awake. He blinked, confusion in his eyes, until he too heard the sounds. His face hardened instantly. He jumped out of bed and grabbed the baseball bat he kept by the nightstand. "Stay here, Margaret," he whispered. "Call the police." But I couldn't just stay. My body was trembling, but my spirit screamed that this was it. This was the fight Robert had promised, even if he wasn't the one standing in front of me. I grabbed my phone with shaking fingers, dialing 911 as we crept toward the sound of footsteps. The intruder moved with purpose. Not a thief, not a random criminal. Someone who knew exactly where we lived, exactly what they wanted. I pressed the phone to my ear, whispering to the dispatcher, "There's someone in the apartment. Please hurry. Please." Then the figure stepped into the light. He wore a dark hoodie pulled low over his face, a knife glinting in his hand. My breath caught in my throat. It was the same man who had tried to stab me on the courthouse steps. But how? He had been arrested, taken away in handcuffs. How was he here? His voice was low, mocking. "Told you, Margaret. Robert doesn't forget his promises." Daniel stepped forward, bat raised. "Get out now, before you regret it." The intruder only laughed, a cold, chilling sound. He lunged. The apartment exploded into chaos. Daniel swung the bat, connecting with the man's arm. The knife clattered to the floor, but the man tackled Daniel, driving him into the wall. They struggled violently, fists and elbows flying. I screamed, grabbing the nearest object I could find, a heavy lamp, and swung it with all my strength. The lamp shattered against the man's back, but it only stunned him for a moment. He whirled around, eyes blazing, and shoved me hard. I fell against the table, pain shooting up my side, but I refused to stay down. Years of being silenced, beaten, and shoved into corners boiled inside me. I had promised myself I would never be a victim again. I grabbed the fallen knife. My hand shook, but I held it up between us. "Stay away from me," the intruder sneered. "You don't have it in you." Daniel, bleeding from his lip, staggered to his feet. "She's stronger than you think." The man lunged again, but this time I didn't freeze. I slashed wildly, not with skill but with desperation. The blade grazed his arm, drawing blood. He hissed and stumbled back, shock flashing across his face. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police were coming. The intruder glared at me, clutching his arm. "This isn't over. Robert's word is law, and his law says you die." Then, as quickly as he had appeared, he bolted through the broken window, disappearing into the night. I collapsed to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. Daniel dropped beside me, pulling me into his arms. "You did it, Margaret. You fought back." The police stormed in moments later, guns drawn, but the intruder was long gone. All that remained were shards of glass, drops of blood, and the echo of his words. The officers secured the apartment, promised extra patrols, and collected the knife for evidence. But when they left, silence filled the room again, heavy and suffocating. Daniel held me close. "He's just a man, Margaret. And men can be caught. Robert's influence won't last forever." But deep down, I knew Robert's poison ran deep. He had built a web of loyalty that would take years to unravel. Still, something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had fought back. I had stood tall when fear tried to break me. Days turned into weeks. Police investigations spread wide, hunting Robert's accomplices. The man who broke in was eventually captured, and with him came a network of others who had been carrying out Robert's threats. Piece by piece, the web began to crumble. Robert himself remained behind bars, his power weakening with each passing day. He sent fewer letters, had fewer followers left willing to risk their lives for him. One afternoon, I sat on Daniel's balcony, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. For the first time in years, I let myself enjoy the quiet without waiting for the sound of footsteps or fists. Daniel joined me, setting 2 cups of tea on the table. "You're free now, Margaret. Truly free." I smiled faintly. "Free. And alive." He touched my hand. "You've given people hope, you know. Your story, what you survived, it's proof that no matter how dark it gets, you can still find the light." Tears filled my eyes, but they were warm tears, not the cold ones I had cried for decades. I thought about all the women who might still be living in fear, too scared to speak, too broken to believe they could escape. And I knew this wasn't just my story anymore. "This is why I have to tell it," I whispered. "So no one else has to live the way I did. So they know they're not alone." Daniel squeezed my hand. "Then tell it, Margaret. And I'll stand by you." And so I do. To everyone watching this, my name is Margaret Walker. I am 68 years old, speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia. I lived through a nightmare, but I came out alive. And I'm telling you now, never stay silent in the face of abuse. Never believe you're too weak to fight back. You are stronger than you know. Please, before we close this chapter of my life, I want you to do 3 things for me. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification button so you won't miss more powerful stories like mine. And tell me in the comments, where in the country are you watching from? I want to know. My story is not just mine. It belongs to every woman, every man, every soul who has ever been told they are worthless. Let me be proof that even in the darkest places, light can break through. Because I am still here. Because I chose to fight. Because I survived.